everybody. This is Jess from 3D Learning Experts, and you're listening to the LD Experts Podcast, the show for busy parents who want to help their kids with learning disabilities, or as I like to say, learning differences, go from surviving to thriving. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to get started, and our guest is Julieta Duvall, who is going to share her experience of homeschooling, how she started, how she deviated from her original plans, and talk to us about her podcast as well. So welcome, Julieta.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone.
Yes, thank you for coming. Okay, so how long have you been homeschooling?
So we are what most people call pandemic homeschoolers, right?
Oh.
So we started in 2020, but prior to that, I had thought about homeschooling because I travel for a living. I'm a flight attendant for a major airline, and I wanted to world school, right? Like travel, learn about it. I picture myself going to Rome and talking about the Roman Empire while eating gelato. I mean, I knew I wanted to do something along those lines. And we thought about it, but I was afraid, in all honesty. I didn't know that I could do it. I wasn't sure what was involved. And I wasn't sure. But in 2019, I met a homeschool mom, who opened the door to a world that I knew nothing about. And I will forever be grateful for her because she shared everything she knew, like different types of homeschooling. And as I was telling her what I wanted to do, she's like, "Oh, you sound like a perfect Charlotte Mason homeschooler." And I was like, "Oh, what is that?" So I started diving deeper. And then, 2020, everyone went virtual. My son was in kindergarten back then, and he was transitioning to first grade. It would have been September 2020. So I'm in Michigan schools closed March 13, 2020, and we went virtual for kindergarten, but that was just insanity almost, right? I mean, he was in the computer and he was only once a week. But then that's when I started thinking about homeschooling, and I started diving a little bit more into the books, into the curriculums and whatnot. So when September 2020, when he was supposed to go into first grade, we said, let's just give it a try. Let's just do a first year. Michigan was back and forth about virtual, online, like in person, virtual, they would close. So there was a lot going on. So we're like, let's just do it for a year and reassess. And we never went back.
Nice. So it's interesting that you said, I didn't know that they had a name for people who started during COVID. And I remember when COVID hit and people were like, we're homeschooling. And I'm like, oh, you're not.
You're not. No, we weren't.
And you're going to give homeschooling a worse name, right? Because a lot of times people think poorly of homeschooling.
Yes.
And I'm like, you guys are calling it homeschooling, but you're on the computer with a bunch of teachers who don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to teach 30 kids online.
Yes.
The only thing you're doing is you are at home.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's the only thing that is homeschooling.
Yes.
And so, I'm glad that there are people who ended up having a good experience, from the situation and truly coming to homeschooling. So, because I'm a huge advocate of homeschooling, of course.
Yeah.
And so when you first started, when you decided to leave the school district, what did you start doing? What kind of homeschooling did you do?
Oh my goodness. It was my favorite kind of because I was doing stuff that I wanted to do, right? So like my friend said, Erin, she said, you're like a Charlotte Mason. So I went into Charlotte Mason to a Charlotte Mason approach, and it was very directed, outdoors. It was very outdoors. It was very art oriented, and then I found like my blend was really eclectic, and I love art, and I'm trying to think of it. Just a lesson, right? It was a lesson about something, and it included all of the subjects, right? So
It's a
it was,
unit study.
yes, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Yes. So I was doing unit studies because I moved, like it was hard for me to stay committed to one whole curriculum. I looked at Abeka. I looked at there was another one similar to Abeka, but it was more secular. It was like sunlight or something.
That's what it's called. Yeah.
Yes. So I looked at them, but I had a hard time committing with the time and also financially, because it was a huge, even though I spent a lot of money at the beginning, I didn't spend it in big chunks. I was spending a lot of money in unit studies, like a unit about dinosaurs, about the planets, or, just something like that. So it was mostly unit studies. It was very eclectic, and I had it in both languages, Spanish and English, right? Because that was one of the reasons why we wanted to homeschool prior to the pandemic. So the fluency of the language could be more available, or the language could be made more available during the day versus just after school,
So when you say you had it in both languages, did you have curriculum in both languages, or were you just instructing in both languages?
Yes, I was doing that in both languages. So I was getting the curriculum. I got a few of them in Spanish, but they weren't really. I had a large, I still do, a large collection of Spanish books, right? And we've always read those. And then so whenever I would get a unit study, I would look at it, and then I would use the same format, but I would do it in Spanish. And that's kind of what we did. That's kind of what we were doing. I joined a lot of in Michigan, outdoor activities were like the one thing that saved us. So there were a few homeschool groups that were meeting up outside, and that's kind of what we did. We started joining their groups and met a lot of people. And every time someone mentioned a curriculum that was good for them, I would buy it. I didn't care what it was. I would just buy it. And it was so exciting for me. It was so exciting for me to have all of that. So we did a lot of art. Uh, I used Blossom and Root. I really liked them. I really liked their curriculum. It was really good. It was very simple, and I could skip what was interesting and what wasn't. So Blossom and Root was good for us. We did building your own library. I definitely stayed on the secular aspect of curriculums. That kind of was our route. So build your own library was also good because I love books and I love literature, and it was nice just to read to them. And we did as many outdoor like field trips as we could back then, to the point where I burned myself out at the beginning.
Because you were just away from your house too much?
Yeah,
Socializing too much?
I felt like I needed to do everything. I felt like everything seemed so good, like some of the outings that they were posting. I felt like I had to do everything in order to compensate for what I thought they were missing, if that makes sense. But I knew, I got to my knowledge soon enough that they weren't missing anything. What we were missing was really connecting as a family, whether it was at home or outside of the home. It didn't matter where we were. It was just that we had too much going on at first. And I knew then, like I learned a little bit later, I felt like I wasn't compensating, because they weren't missing anything, to me. That's what I learned at the end, right? Like, they weren't missing the lines, or, being in the school, moving from one classroom to another. Like, that's not what, or something that was missing, if that makes sense.
So was anything missing?
Uh, it was missing. What I was missing was the connection with my oldest son, because I was doing stuff that I wanted to do. The Charlotte Mason approach, was very appealing to me, but he was not appealing to him, and some of the stuff that I wanted to do I was doing it because I wanted to do it. And he would be like, can we just do something else? And I'm like, no, we got to do this. And I had my schedule, right? I had this like schedule that I had to complete in order for me to feel successful. Right. As because I felt like that's the way, in the school system, like you have this curriculum that allows you to proceed to the next grade. So I felt that pressure of having to do that and having to achieve certain things, certain markers, so we can move on to the next level. And slowly I realized that it didn't matter. Like he was not going to be more successful or less successful just because we completed that particular book. If he wasn't something that he was interested in. It was just the same thing, right? If you're interested in it, you move through it. But if you're not and you move through it, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stay with you.
Yeah. So you started off with Charlotte Mason and then
Yes.
you moved to unit studies,
Yes.
right? And what are you doing now?
So right now we are considered unschoolers.
Okay.
Yes. And I know that's a scary word for a lot of people, because it leaves the curriculum behind. It focuses on the connection between the family and between all of us and what brings joy to everyone. And that doesn't always look the same. But the hardest part, I think, about unschooling is to let go of, the deschooling that we have to go through. Even when you're transitioning to homeschooling, there is so much deschooling that you have to do.
Let's talk about what deschooling is, please.
Okay, in my short version, and there are many articles and many people, and I'm sure you probably have done some videos about what deschooling is. But what I consider deschooling is letting go of the beliefs that they have been passed on to us when it comes to education, and letting go of the fact that, just an example, that children should be reading by age 6. Or that math should be taught in a linear way, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then you go on to these subjects. It's letting go of all of those beliefs, and furthermore, asking questions about why you had that belief, and once you start diving deeper into that, then you start realizing that some of the things that they do in the public school system, doesn't apply to your family because it is meant to do something completely different, right? The classroom has more children. Your family only has maybe 2-3 children. So the same principles or the same stuff that they do in the school, you shouldn't be doing that at home because you only have 2 or 3 individuals, children's that you could, that you're working with, right? So the deschooling aspect was huge.
And they say parents need more deschooling time than the children do because parents have more years of the traditional school expectations.
Without a doubt. I mean, the deschooling process, we've been at this. So we started 2020, we transitioned into like fully unschooling, like sometime in the middle of 2021. And I started writing about, that transition process. And that's where my work is mostly, that's where I love, that's what I love, is to see people through this transition, through asking the questions about why they think that they have to do something, right? And I have noticed that my deschooling process, it's not necessarily as wide, but it is very deep. I started with one thing about reading, why my son needed to read by age 6, because that was one of our things actually too. When we were going into first grade, they told me that they wanted my son to repeat kindergarten because he wasn't at the reading level that the school wanted him to be. So I went frantically into reading, like the money that I spent, it was mostly on reading curriculums because I wanted him to bring him up to standards, right? Because I didn't want him to be behind. And I feel like that's a huge, when we transition into homeschooling, that's like, we don't want our children to be behind. But then when you start diving deep and peeling those layers about who is it that they're behind, like who's in front of them and who's after them, there really isn't a tangible person. It's just some standard that was set, and then you look at your son or your daughter, and then they love to do maybe art, and they're not ready to dive into the reading part yet, but they love the art. They love the painting. They love the drawing. I mean, so many people are talented in that. And sometimes we take that joy away from them because we feel like they have to be reading. So we're like, no, 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 come this way. We have to do this reading. We have to do this reading. But they really love the art, and they are marvelous artists. And, so I had to let go of that, of what I thought was important for him, that was coming from a different direction, that it was from outside.
Sorry. It's funny because my daughter and son-in-law plan on homeschooling their children when they have them.
Mm-hmm.
And my son-in-law, who is a lawyer, said he wants the kids to be reading by 3 or 4. And
Yes.
he expects me to teach them this. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. First of all, my tutoring company is for kids who struggle with reading.
Yes.
So we help kids who have dyslexia. We are, and my focus is not on trying to force a preschooler to read. Now, if that preschooler wants to start reading, my oldest child did that. My oldest child was reading by 5, and by age 7 was reading on an 8th grade reading level.
Yeah.
But my other 3 children were not that way. And so, like you said, it's better to let them do it at their own pace. And if you are homeschooling, you have the freedom. To not feel the pressure, unless you're planning on putting your child back to school at a specific time. If you're going back to school in 2 years, well, then, they're going to have to stay on track for the educational system. But otherwise, if your intention is to homeschool indefinitely, you don't have the pressures of what traditional school says.
Exactly. And I remember one of my first posts was that, though, it was that if you start on this journey, I think there's a reason for it, right? There's whether maybe your child's having a hard time at school and there's a lot of anxiety coming in, or, perhaps you're a military family that moves every couple of years, and this just makes more sense for you. It is to have like an idea, a general idea, of what that goal is, so you can navigate. It's like setting out to sea with no definite direction, right? Like if you just start sailing and you think you're going to do a week road trip, but instead ends up being a month, then the preparation is a little bit different. And just like you said, if you're going back to the school system, then I highly recommend just talking to your child, especially if they're like in the 9, maybe 10 age, or, at all ages really, and just find out how can you guys meet those goals to, perhaps go back if that's what the goal is, or maybe that's your particular situation that you require that you need to go back. That's totally okay. But if you talk to I think talking to your child will make your journey a lot easier, and exploring the different curriculums. If you feel like you want to buy that, I personally, if I had to do it all over again, I would save my money. I would save my money for maybe about a year or 2, because I spend a lot. I spend almost $10,000 in the first year.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I don't think I ever spent $10,000
the
entire 11 years I homeschooled.
Yes. And you really don't have to. And this is, like I said, this is very personal, but I went all crazy I had I was Montessori inclined as well. So I had the Montessori shelving, I had the Montessori toys. If you looked at those prices, those materials are pretty expensive sometimes. So I spend a lot of money, and in all honesty, I didn't have to. You don't have to spend. any money really to start homeschooling, because the libraries are a plethora of information. They have amazing resources. So yeah, save your money.
Thank
Save
you
your
for
money.
sharing that, because it is true. So many people will jump in and start
Yes.
just buying, and then realize that whatever curriculum they purchase may not be what
Yes.
is
Good for their
in
family.
line with their family. Yes. And
Yes.
one of the things I will suggest, or I would like to suggest, is borrow from people.
Yes.
Homeschoolers are very generous
Yes.
and they're willing to share. And so you could borrow curriculum for a couple of weeks and see if it's something that your family likes. And so that's a great way to kind of determine what type of homeschooling is good for you. Another great resource that is much more economical is to buy things at curriculum sales,
Yes.
which during the summer is typically when you'll find curriculum sales.
Mhm.
And because people want to sell their old curriculum so that they can buy new curriculum.
Mhm.
And nowadays you can go to Facebook groups and just type in what you're looking for and then buy
Yes.
it used and have someone ship it to you. So you can
Mhm.
ship it from Michigan to California, no problem.
Mhm. And there are so many bookstores. There's a couple of bookstores in Texas that are like homeschooling oriented, and they have a lot of that. So there's definitely a lot of online resources. And I remember doing park days. We would go once a week park days, and we would talk about curriculums and whatnot. And then we would offer to bring a sample from what we were using on the next park date. So then we would bring our books and we would pass them around and we would share them. And it was just a way to get your hands on it, but my biggest thing on that, I think, is that I wish I liked them. I wish I would have had more conversations with my son about, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think, do you like this, perhaps these lessons that they have? That's probably instead of buying all of it, because I just bought all of it.
Well,
So,
and we don't think about including our children
yes.
in the planning.
And it's so, and now I think back and I'm like, why didn't I do that? And honestly, there were just so many voices in my, not voices in my head, but I felt the pressure. I felt the pressure that as a homeschooling, I had to exceed everyone else's expectations. And
Mm.
that's where that was one of the deschooling aspect that I had to let go, that I was, my family was more important than everyone else's expectations, right? And then once I turned into my family instead of listening or the thinking about these pressures that I had and to just letting them go, then life became a little bit easier for us, because I wasn't worried that they weren't going to be socialized enough. So I didn't have to be out and about every single day thinking that I had to do that, or I didn't have to put the pressure of finishing up a curriculum that perhaps just wasn't working. And it was okay to switch curriculum in the middle of the year if it's not working for you. Right.
So you brought up socialization, and of course that is what everyone who doesn't homeschool say, well, how are your kids going to socialize? What is your response to that?
Uh, think about it. So I'm a flight attendant, right? So think about it. If you go to an airport, and that's what I say, because if you go to an airport to take a flight, you are going to be around thousands of people. But that doesn't mean that you are going to become friends with those 3,000 people. It's the same thing in the school system. You go to a school, you are around hundreds of people, sometimes thousands, right? It depends on how big the school is. But that doesn't mean that you are going to become, friends with those thousands of people. And the other aspect is, what is your definition of socialization? For me, socialization for my children is the formation of deep bonds with their peers, people that they can connect with in whatever they are engaged in, right? Like to have the freedom to connect with other people. And sometimes that is unable to happen at the school system just because they have to be switching from class to class. There's no time to talk because you have to pay attention to whoever's doing the teaching. So the amount of freedom that they have to really form bonds, it's very minimal. Like, I don't even know that it could really reach an hour of just free time for you to talk to your friend and then just talk about, I don't know, whatever video you like to watch or whatever, Pokemon, your cards you have. There is not enough time to form those bonds. Sure, you're with them, but that doesn't mean you're forming those bonds. And that's what I see as socialization for us. Like, you are around a lot of people, but it doesn't mean you're going to become friends with a lot of people. So
That's great. I love your analogy that relates to your profession.
yeah.
And let's talk about that. So how do you continue to work and homeschool your children?
So our family is very lucky in the sense that my husband stays home when I'm at work. I typically work, my schedule changes every day or every month, so right now I will be heading to Amsterdam tonight, actually. And
Oh,
then
wow.
I will be back on in a few days. So my husband stays home, and because I believe homeschooling, unschooling, it's a family affair. So everyone does what works, we work together to make that work. But the time they spend with my husband is a little bit different, because they do a lot of home projects. They go to the Home Depot a lot. They're outside a lot. They do boy stuff. I have two boys. And then when I'm home, I love road trips. So road trips are my thing, whether it's on day trips on an airplane or road trips to see our friends. We have a friend that lives about 2 hours away from us. So that's kind of like, our schedule is very consistently inconsistent. That's the way I describe it, because our life is like that all the time. So but I know sometimes homeschooling, this is the hard part, that is, even though you want to do it, it's not always feasible for everyone. So I am very aware of that. But we just, sometimes we make sacrifices financially in one way or another. My husband's a contractor, and he's in real estate, so sometimes he works more, sometimes his job is very flexible, as well as mine. And that it really helps out a lot, but I know it's not always easy for everyone. So I can understand that. So
Well, you have shared so much
I
great
know.
information, and I want to let everyone know that you have a YouTube channel. And what are you sharing on your channel?
So on our YouTube channel, I focus on travel. So I share a lot of traveling stuff, but I also in regards to unschooling, I share on the transition to unschooling from like mainstream schools, or sometimes traditional homeschooling, because that's kind of that was my route. So I shared that transition for people, and then I started diving in a little bit more into the personal work that we have to do as parents sometimes, because that's also has been a huge part of my journey. So so lately that's what it has been.
So will you share a little bit about what you mean about that?
Yeah. So, when you're with your children 24/7, things every now and then, people call them triggers, maybe perhaps they're playing with each other too roughly or something. And then you just kind of like, you feel overwhelmed, there's a lot going on. You feel the pressures of other people and stuff like that. And then you feel overwhelmed, and all of a sudden, you're like snap or something, but some of that comes from childhood, really, when we go back as to what makes us upset. And the example I can give is when my son was working through a video game in the levels, and he was really excited. He was like, I'm almost done. I'm going to reach this level and stuff like that. And it was important to him. But we were going in the car and I said, no video games in the car. And this is a big one for people, video games and technology overall. But I said, no video games in the car, nothing. And he was like, but why? And I was like, I don't know why. So let me dig deeper. Let me think about that. And I realized that the reason why I didn't want him to be playing his game in the car is because I was concerned that other people would see me as the mom who let his son play video games in the car. So because if my son had had a book in his hands and wanted to read the book in the car, I would have been like a peacock, right? I would have been proud that my son chose to read a book in the car. And I would be like, look at me, people. I love my son's reading a book in the car. What is yours doing, right? So I felt that the reason why I didn't want him to do that was because the way he made me feel had nothing to do with him. And as I realized, this triggers, now I call them invitations. To me, they're just invitations for us to dive deeper in as to why we feel that way. Because generally speaking, our children are absolutely perfect. They do not go out of their way to make our life more difficult. They really don't. And when we feel that way, if you feel, oh, you're just making me so crazy, just take a moment and sit with the emotion and find out where that emotion comes from. And then as you find it, as you find a root, then go a little bit deeper, because most of that comes from our own childhood. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm getting ready to start a program in psychology a little bit, to dive a little bit deeper into that. And
if someone wanted to, it sounds like you are doing coaching. Is that the service you're providing?
Yeah, so I do. So I help people in transition to unschooling, but the transition or the help that I provide is more for the parent. It really isn't, it really isn't for your son or daughter. It is mostly for the parent, for you to let go of the beliefs, that they have been passed down on us. So I do that, and I like to do like group coaching almost, but very in just small groups, just because I have a lot to say and I really put in my energy in all of it. So I only do it a few times a month. So yeah, but you can reach me from a YouTube channel, from our Instagram, from our website that should be up and running hopefully in the next week or so, and from our Facebook community too.
And so how do they find you?
So our YouTube channel, it's The Unschooling Lifestyle, and everything in Instagram is the same. It's just got the underscore. So the underscore unschooling underscore lifestyle. And then our Facebook community is just that, The Unschooling Lifestyle. So that's usually our website is theunschoolingLifestyle.com.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Julieta, thank you so much for your time and sharing all of your insight with us about your journey thus far homeschooling.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I wish everyone a beautiful and amazing journey, because it's so worth it.